Lecture number 4 on ancient Rome for our unit is going to cover how Rome moved from a republic to an empire. And we're going to be looking at the influence of Julius Caesar on those events to be able to transition from one government to the other. And we're going to start here with kind of a little bit of backstory that kind of leads into Caesar coming onto the stage. Towards the end of the Republic era of Rome, we begin to see a couple of different problems that begin to kind of crack at the foundations of the society and will lead towards a transition away from the republic form of government to an emperor in charge. And again, we want to make sure we understand we're condensing a lot of history and we're simplifying a lot of things. But one of the big problems that's going on is the gap between the rich Romans and the poor Romans began to grow and grow and grow to where the rich Romans very much did not have a frame of reference, a understanding of just how bad it was for the poor. And as the poor began to realize their political influence and where their allegiance can be able to be shifted towards and be used, that has a influential bearing on how Roman politics and elections will bear out. What we see is that the rich Romans are going to be living on these giant estates, these latifundia. These latifundia are off in the countryside and become, for not all, but for many of the rich Romans, the source of their income for their agriculture, and lots of different ways to make money on these farms, not just growing crops or harvesting fruit, but be able to grow cattle or sheep or other things there. So they live on these giant estates that are usually managed by employees or slaves. That income then allows them to have summer villas and residences in the city of Rome as well. So they kind of live in their own kind of sense of society, their own kind of way of life, which is very much is totally the opposite of what we see a lot of the day-to-day life of the other Romans. Rome is a slavery economy. It's estimated that 1 out of every 3 people in Rome is enslaved by the 1st century BC. The slave economy of Rome is going to obviously allow the rich to save money. They have workers and they're able to not have to pay them. So they're able to save money that way to only increase their wealth. And we want to just mention here, because we'll talk about slavery in a lot of different societies. We've mentioned already before, and we'll mention again, slavery is not probably what you've been taught in sort of the American form of slavery for the Civil War in your elementary or middle schools. We want to be able to separate that idea out a little bit. We're talking about the Roman slavery here because very much slavery in the Roman world is a changing situation. You can move in and out of slavery within years and sometimes or your whole life. So we just want to make sure the connotation here is a little bit different, but that does become an issue if 1 of every 3 people are enslaved. We also see large amounts of urban poor. So these are people instead of giving like a number classification or kind of a wealth, how much they have, you basically want to think of people who don't know where their next meal is going to come from, where when they wake up in the morning, they're not exactly sure where they'll be able to sleep at night. And obviously that provides another level of anxiety that affects your work, affects your be able to your relationships. And if 1/4 of Rome is poor and is living hand to mouth and day to day like this, if 1/3 of Rome on top of that is slaves, that becomes a large amount of people who are kind of being left out of the growth of the empire that we see during the Punic Wars. And all that money that's flowing into Rome isn't being distributed to everybody. So those are just some of the issues that are having some of the larger ones. And obviously, some politicians take notice of this and begin to say, let's make some changes. It doesn't have to be this way. So 2 brothers are going to come along. These are the Gracchus brothers. They're going to be separated about 10 or 15 years. So one brother is going to come along and then another brother is going to follow him after him. And to simplify this is they're basically saying The rich don't need all these giant estates. There's no reason for them to have that, because if we take those giant estates and we just take a small section of that to where the rich are losing a fractions of their income and then give it to the poor to be able to then grow their own food, to be able to make some money, that's going to have a huge effect for the poor of Rome. It's not going to affect the rich of Rome very much, and they do a lot of these land reforms to various scales of success. We want to emphasize that they try these, they're able to get these into place, but we ask a simple question: if you're taking away land from the rich, they're not going to be happy about it. So this is going to anger the rich people of Rome, and that's going to have both Gracchus brothers be murdered, stabbed to death in the streets of Rome, very publicly for everyone to see, as kind of a very much a message to anybody else who's going to try to reform, that you better work with the power players, the aristocrats, the rich of Rome, because if you don't, you're going to end up like the Gracchus brothers, well remembered, but also very dead. So that's what's going on, and that's kind of the interplay that's happening within, very much within the city of Rome itself. You can extrapolate it throughout the empire, but that's what's going on in there, and that's going to have an effect on the story to come. Another big thing that happens is what are referred to as the Marian reforms in the army, where the general Marius is going to make a series of decisions for his personal reasons, for reason Rome's, to basically go and take the citizen soldier idea of Rome, with the idea that you are protecting capital R Rome when barbarians are at the gate and we need decisions. You put down your shovel and you go fight for the glory and honor of Rome, to protect your house, to protect your dog, to protect your wife, to protect your children. Well, the question becomes, as Rome expands, as we have Romans in Greece and you're expanding into the Middle East and you're going down and working in North Africa and you're going to Spain and you're fighting the Gauls and France, it is, if you're on the border, if you're in southern France and the Gallic army is coming towards you, is that going to affect your family in Napoli, in Italy? And so that's kind of the thing that the Romans begin to do here. And now, again, we're simplifying a lot of different stuff here. A lot of these reforms are in serving the need of Marius in very much a civil war that he's fighting against other people within other senators in the Senate who are allied against him, as well as the General Sulla. And so he needs, for his personal reasons, a army to be able to do that. But what we see happen here is that the citizen soldier idea of Rome is going to be replaced with a professional soldier paid for by the treasury of Rome. Meaning, what we've done here is that you are now taking and offering jobs to a lot of these urban poor. You now don't need to be able to worry about where your next meal is coming from, because you're serving in the army. And after filling out your contract in a set number of years, you can be retired and you're going to be paid in land and have your own retirement in form of a farm to be able to raise your family after X number of years in there. So we're kind of serving a couple different ends to this. You're able to keep expanding Rome because you have an increased military. You're able to provide poor people jobs in the service of Rome. So you're still fighting for the idea of the glory of Rome, that type of idea. You're providing that, and you're also motivating people to expand, because that allows for more things there. So a lot of good things that are being checked off here. And again, like we said, simplifying stuff that provides armies and soldiers for the General Marius in his struggles. But the major effect here, and might be a little bit more historiography, might be more played in there, but we'll see this happen here, is the idea that with the move to professional army, the loyalty of the military will begin to imperceptibly shift. It's not like, oh, we have a professional army and then a switch is flicked and now we go over there. Is that the loyalty of the military begins to move away from the glory and honor and fighting for capital R Rome and what that means and represents, to this idea of a good general in the Roman army is one that wins. And these Roman generals are not dumb enough to be able to understand that a lot of these battles aren't won because of what they're doing. It's the blood, sweat, and tears of the soldiers on the ground there. So these generals, as they're beginning to expand Rome, are taking stuff from the people they're conquering. They are then sending it back to Rome, but they're also keeping it for themselves, but also providing it to the soldiers as a reward. Hey, let's take this next town. Let's defeat these next people, because you'll get a a slice of the booty. And these generals that keep winning and winning and winning with this professional army, the soldiers begin to say, I like this general and I like him. I'm fighting for him because he gives me victories. Victories give me cash. Victories give me rewards. I like this. And what then begins to happen if one of these generals decides he wants to be a political player within Rome and starts to use the army that's now more loyal to him rather than capital R Rome? Okay, what begins to happen when the soldiers begin to fight just for their general and not for the glory and honor of Rome? And that's the big effect that we see with the professionalization of the Roman army in the last century BC, or in this second century to first century BC of the Roman Republic. So these are the giant latifundia that the rich are living on. These are very much going to be the precursor to the medieval manors that we'll see and talk about in our Middle Ages unit, which will then become the precursors and foremost of the great plantations in the southern United States. These are self-sufficient farms and estates. Your shovel breaks. There's no general store in the middle of Italy, so you've got to go make it on there. And again, from the picture and the diagram here, lots of different ways to be able to go and make money off of these different estates. And again, the bigger estates you have, the more variety of ways you can make money, the more guaranteed, quotation marks, that money is going to come in, the richer you can become. So this helps to grow that gap between the rich and the poor, and the two Gracchus brothers are going to come along and say, can we make some concessions from the rich to be able to provide some help to the poor of Rome? And one of these ideas, their land reform, and so this is a picture taken from 1945 in World War II when American bombers are flying over Italy. And again, picture taken looking for German soldiers in this context. But the idea is that we can see the land reforms of the Gracchus brothers from the air into the 20th century. And so what they're doing here, and you can kind of see the big giant squares that are taken, right? And these are sections from the latifundia that the Gracchus brothers are saying, let's take them and break them up into sections here, and then give each one of these small sections to the urban poor of Rome. And so the idea being is that they now have a place to be able to make some money. They can grow their own food. They can help themselves out. And we're affecting the rich in a small way, but you're impacting the poor in a much larger way. And you can see these land divisions ideas literally from an airplane all the way up into the 20th century. Now, this is going to get both the Gracchus brothers killed, but that's their way to try to be able to address this issue of the gap growing between the rich and the poor. And we just want to mention and bring this up. This is a gap that is growing as we speak, particularly in the United States. Now, this worked out really well a couple years ago when I was doing this and this a little bit, but then Jeff Bezos got himself divorced, so cut his. So the numbers are going to be off a little bit. The people are going to change slightly, but the same basic idea is this: that again, on the scale between the richest man in the United States, whether that's Elon Musk today on October 30th of 2024, or say a couple years ago, prior to his divorce from his wife Mackenzie, Jeff Bezos at $165 billion. On this scale, effectively, I have no money. You have no money. I mean, that's the scale that we have in here. So when we're looking at this, the factors of the change here is astronomical because it's hard to be able to fathom what a $1 billion with a B is. And so when we go and take a look at the scale and you see things like Elon Musk with $50 million on this scale, or Michael Bloomberg $60 billion, they are much closer to me and you and most of the average Americans on the scale versus, say, Jeff Bezos, who's got all the money. And again, even if Elon Musk has all the monies, it's the same basic idea on there. And again, if we bring out the laser pointer, the graph says here, like, this is Lionel Messi and that's Kanye West, and these are other major billionaires. That's Rihanna, okay, that are on there. And again, we have much more closer in scale with those types of people. I have more in common financially with Rihanna, who has $1 billion plus, than Rihanna does with Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk, who have hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's when we're talking about when this gap of the rich and poor growing. And it's very much a connection we can make with us today. So that's happening with the economy and the society of Rome militarily. This shift of the General Marius from a citizen soldier army to a professional army is also going to have major changes, particularly when we have charismatic great generals to be able to inspire loyalty of those professional troops to themselves rather than to the greater glory of Rome. So the great expanse that we see with the Roman Empire begins with the Punic Wars. And those Punic Wars are going to provide Rome the opportunity to expand, but Julius Caesar is going to be one to provide that vision of expansion, of growth that we think of when we think of the Roman Empire. And Julius Caesar very much is going to be the stepping stone from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. And he's going to have this kind of meteoric rise to be able to go from the just a counselorship to being in charge of all of Rome and shifting it along there. So what we see with the rise to power, Julius Caesar, and again, one, we want to make sure we understand that there's fact and there's legend in there, and the legend sometimes makes for a really good story, but the facts might not be as great, lost in the mix there. So you got to kind of separate not only the facts from the legend, but also be able to understand that I'm giving you very much the bare bones story of this, because Caesar is going to be playing and his name's going to pop up in a lot of different things. There's a reason why Shakespeare writes a play about him. There's a reason why HBO has a mini series called Rome, where Caesar is one of the central characters to that tale. So Caesar is going to be Gaius Julius Caesar. He's coming from the Julii clan. In there. So he's born to a relatively powerful family within Rome. However, when we talked about that civil war between Marius and Sulla, the Julii clan are kind of on the way out and are after the dust settles from that first civil war. They are trying to work their way back into the good graces of high society in Rome. So that's going to also provide some of the motivations and stuff in here for Caesar, is that he's trying to get his family name kind of shine back up, buff to a higher polish than what it is as it dragged through the mud from picking wrong sides through that early rise to power. Caesar, again, legends will say that a woman who gives birth to a baby through the non-normal ways is probably the best way to say it. If you're going and cutting that mom open to realize it's a cesarean section, and that's probably most likely, at least in English, named after one of Caesar's earliest or early ancestors. But it's, again, legend says that Caesar, right, was born by C-section like this, but which doesn't make sense because his mom's going to live after that. So he's going to rise up there, and he's very much comes up in other people's writings as a young child who's very ambitious, who is very much driven, and is smart as a whip as a young child. And so he's going to kind of, other families are going to try to manipulate this rise and try to keep him from gaining any of this power. He's going to break into the Roman religion. He's going to be Pontifex Maximus of Rome as a teenager to try to sideball him, bracket him into the religion, and he's going to be able to work his way out and finally get into the military that he likes. One of his early military campaigns is to go into the Aegean and all the thousands of islands in there and hunt down pirates, and there he gets himself captured by these pirates. And this is one of the great stories of Caesar to kind of give some background and other stuff. And again, whether it's true or not, it makes for a great story, but there's elements we can pull out from there. One of the things that they say when he is captured by the pirates is the pirates recognize, oh, we've got a young rising officer in the Roman army. We can hold him for ransom. So let's write a ransom note. We're going to ask for 20 talents of gold. And it's a fair amount. And Caesar, and again, you got to kind of picture this in a movie or in a TV show, looking over the shoulder while this ransom note saying, whoa, hold on. How much are you charging for me? Do you know who I am? Do you think I can't pay a bigger ransom? I'm Julius Caesar. 20 talents of gold is an insult. Slams his fist on the table. I demand 50 talents of gold to be able to go in for my ransom. And the pirates look at each other and say, if 20's less than 50, yeah, go ahead. All right, we'll take that. The stories we have of Caesar with the pirates is the idea that he doesn't act as a captive would. He goes and practices political speeches on the beaches as the pirates are doing their day-to-day pirate activity. He begins to look at those pirates as midsections and be able to rub their bellies and say, hey, you're kind of putting on a couple extra pounds here. And Caesar is said to have led calisthenics and workouts for these pirates to whip them into shape to become better pirates. And all the while he's befriending them, he's saying, hey, pirates, once this ransom comes, I'm going to turn around, be released, grab myself the nearest legion I can, I'm coming back. I'm going to crucify every last one of you. And the pirates are saying, oh, Caesar, we're becoming friends, you big joker, this, that, or the other. And that's what we go and we see there. And then the ransom arrives. The pirates say, it's nice to know you. Caesar says, yeah, let's give me a hug, bring it in, shake your hands. Hey, I'm coming back to crucify you. And the pirates, it's okay, Caesar. If you can find us, then we'll do that. So Caesar's paid, goes back to the nearest town in Turkey with the Roman legion, sails right back up. Pirates are there on the beach to go and welcome him. Caesar says, I'm back, clamps them in irons, takes them back, puts them on trial. They're all convicted. And the pirates in their jail cells are saying, Caesar, I thought we were friends. I thought we were doing this. You're going to crucify us? And Caesar goes and has a change of heart. Pirates, we did have good times. We were this. You are nice. Crucifying you seems like it'd be a bad idea. I know. I'll just behead you instead. And that's what he goes and responds to with the pirates. Now, this episode with the pirates is going to haunt Caesar's political career, and his political enemies are going to bring this up to him a lot because of that. And the accusations be that he had too good of a time with these pirates, that, he wasn't just he acted less as a captive and more of one of them. And again, the insults that we hold is that Caesar would go, and Caesar's a good-looking guy here in his late teens, early 20s, and Caesar would go to the pirate kind of king, all right, the head pirate's tent at night, all right, and then every morning would be seen leaving that pirate's tent in the morning. And you can kind of, I'll let you fill in the details of the insults and other stuff that are being hurled at him. But this is an event that's going to follow Caesar for the rest of his life. Now, Caesar is a military genius, and he's one of the great military commanders in not only Roman history, but we can, again, feel free to have this argument in other places. You very much in world history, ? If you go to the Army War College or West Point in the United States military, army officers will study ancient campaigns, and Caesar will loom large in the curriculum of those courses. So he does a lot. And again, we can go into every single story that we do have in going from Italy over the Alps into modern-day France, Gaul, and fighting with the different Gallic tribes in there that he's doing. He goes and was one of the first Romans to build a bridge across the Rhine River, which is pretty impressive from not only an engineering point of view, but from a military logistics point of view. He goes and lays siege to one of these Gallic towns and traps most of the enemies inside that town and builds a wall 2 or 3 miles around there to not let anything in out, to starve the people into submission. Well, those people are willing to wait it out because another Gallic army surprises Caesar from behind. So Caesar tells his Romans, face the other way and build another wall facing out. So picture like a donut with the Gallic town in the center, a Roman wall, the Roman soldiers, and then another Roman wall on the Gallic army that's around there, and Caesar is able to get himself out of that. So again, we could spend, to be honest, a whole semester working through Caesar's military campaigns and exploits. But the big thing that he does is he recognizes that these victories will win him support amongst the Roman people. So he's going to exploit this military career in his commentaries on the war in Gaul, which is his book that he goes and writes to be able to tell the Roman people. And again, the audience for this, it is written for their consumption. It's not written for scholars or historians or people in the future. It's written for the Roman people, the mob at that time, to revel and see all the great thing that Caesar does. We want to make 2 quick comments on this because this is part of the reason why we have a Little Caesar's Pizza today, and why we have a Caesar salad, and why Caesar lives in such a big mythic part of even our 21st century lives here, is that this is written, again, for the audience of regular Romans, and the style that Caesar writes in is direct, is simple, it is short, clear statements and sentences. It's not very fancy, it's not highfalutin, it's not going like a Mr. Cranmer, long train of thoughts and multiple digressions. It's quick, it's pointed, It's very clear to see. And so that not only makes it easy for people to understand, right, that it's also going to be one of the reasons why in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, right, if you these students who are learning Latin, one of the first big books that you read, right, your introduction as a 7th or 8th grader to a larger Latin work is Julius Caesar's. And so again, for a seventh grader and 8th grader, you read all of Caesar's victories and all this stuff. This is going to play in a lot of little boys' minds for a long time as they're learning Latin. And so that's part of the reason we're doing this. And he's also writing this in the third person. So Caesar, when he's writing this, is not saying, I crossed the Rhine, I invaded Britain, I built this wall. He's saying Caesar crossed the Rhine, and Caesar invaded Britain, and Caesar conquered the Helvetii. And that becomes a big thing because it makes it seem as if to the untrained, questioning eye that Caesar is so important, someone's following along and writing all this rather than understanding that it's basically just coming from his brain to yours. So Caesar begins to rise in power, and as he's working his political power, writing his military exploits, he begins to run up into the difficulties of the Roman Republic in having one person being in charge. Because remember, we've talked about this in previous lectures, the Romans hate with a fiery passion of a million suns any notion of a king. That's why they have two councils. That's why they have two elected assemblies. That's why they have all these senators. Problem Caesar begins to run into is he's not the only rising military, political, ambitious young man in there, and that there's two other guys, Crassus and Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great, who also would like to do that. And so what these guys finally realize that it's going to be cheaper and to their own benefit for them to share the consulship rather than to fight each other for it every single year. And so the first triumvirate is a unstated but very much uneasy but political alliance amongst these three guys to rotate the two consular positions through them. So 1 year you might have Crassus and Pompey run for consulship and Caesar sits it out, and then Pompey and Caesar runs and Crassus, and we can run our way all through the different ideas that way. So that's what they're going and doing. Now, who are these other guys? Crassus is one of the richest people ever to have lived on the earth, period. He's top 10 at least. He is extraordinarily wealthy. He is a banker, and to shorten this up because we're kind of running away from this idea, is that why is he involved here? He does not have the military career that Pompey and Caesar do, but he is able, because of his vast wealth, provide Pompey and Caesar lines of credit to be able to have them throw parties, them have games for the Roman mobs, for them to build public buildings, to gain the people's trust that way. And so because he has these guys in debt to him, he's able to use that to his political advantage and get himself in there. Now, as we said, Crassus is, one, lacking the military careers of Pompey and Caesar, and two, his love of gold, all right, is legion, is well known. When he gets command of a legion to go into the Syrian province to try to win glory there, it ends up poorly for him. He's not a Pompey or a Caesar militarily. He's going to get himself captured. And the Syrian people that capture him, and again, whether this actually happens or is more poetic, it makes for a good story, is that knowing of Crassus's love for gold, they say, hey, we've captured you, but we're going to be nice. We're going to provide you with refreshments here. You can drink this liquid gold that's then poured down his throat. And obviously, to heat gold up to liquid form is a little hot, and that's what's going to go and kill him. And so that's Crassus for you. Pompey, again, someone we could spend an entire semester on. He's another great Roman general. We want to understand the age difference here. Also plays a little bit in it. Caesar is 10 years or so, right? Pompey and Crassus are older than Caesar, and not by a year or two. There's a little bit of an age gap. It's not a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old, but there's an age gap with Crassus and Pompey already kind of having this political clout, and Caesar being this young upstart, just as Pompey was a young upstart in his military career. So he's a great Roman general towards the end of his military career and into this kind of the end of the Republic. Pompey is very much turning into this powerful politician who's working with the people to fulfill his political goals, and Caesar is kind of coming along in there. So Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar are doing this, and very much Pompey and Caesar begin to go and take a look, and with Crassus gone, want to then take that power for themselves. In the Republic era, very much rewards people who share power and not hoard it for themselves. And as Caesar begins to work with the people and begin to gain more power, the senators in Rome in particular begin to say that he is putting on the trappings of a king. We don't like this. We want to head him off. They're able to gather and persuade Pompey to their side to be able to try to either get rid of Caesar or remove him on this path that they think is moving towards a kingship, which again the Romans don't like. So Caesar goes off campaign. He's away from Rome. Pompey and the conspirators against Caesar work in the Senate to pass a series of resolutions saying that Caesar is wrong. We're going to go do that. And the big important thing they say, and again we're combining things, we're simplifying, is that Caesar needs to return to Rome to face these accusations. So Caesar, hearing about this on campaign, begins to march with his army back towards Rome as intended. And the big key thing that happens here is that he's going to reach the Rubicon River. And this is an important event. This is on our final exam in the fall. This is on our quiz. We want to understand that, one, crossing the Rubicon River physically is not that great of a feat. Right? We'll show you pictures of this. There's points where you can hop from one end of the bank to the other. The symbolic nature of it is important because symbolically, importantly, unstated, Roman generals, when they are recalled to Rome, when they need further instructions, when they are to be honored, when they are to be reprimanded, when they are to be able to meet with the Senate to describe things are going, you bring your legion to the Rubicon River. This is north of Rome. You camp on the opposite side of the river. You leave your arms, and you and maybe a lieutenant unarmed come into the city. And it's very much this dividing line. Symbolically, you don't bring your army into capital R Rome. Caesar, when he gets to the Rubicon, says that and kind of self conceptualize and puts it on himself that I'm working for the people. If I want to go and head off this political alliance against me, I need to be able to stop Pompey and his senators that are allied with him. So he crosses the Rubicon with his army. And it's this action that will then start a civil war between Caesar and his allies and Pompey and his allies in there. And this civil war will take over a couple years and will eventually lead to Caesar defeating Pompey in battle. So this civil war, Pompey is forced to leave Italy. He's going to be defeated in Greece, lose a couple other battles, and eventually he's going to get himself trying to find support in Egypt, and very unceremoniously, and there's no big kind of standoff. There's no duel at the high noon like in an old Western. Pompey is going to land in Egypt trying to gain support there, and the leader of Egypt, Ptolemy, has allies of his and underlings of his murder Pompey on the beaches as he's going for there, right? Which goes and pretty much ends the civil war. Caesar then goes and kills Ptolemy to kind of go and do this. So why is Caesar able to keep all this going? What support does he have? Is that he does not have much support amongst the senators, but he has support amongst the people, and his popularity that he drives and he understands, and the propaganda he puts out is able to keep him in power. He provides free bread and free circuses for the Roman mob. Again, less clowns and elephants and trapeze artists circuses, more like gladiatorial games, chariot races for free. Think of how popular a politician would be today if they provided free beer and free NFL football game tickets, right? And people would say, oh, I like this. I'm keep voting for this politician. He ruled justly and efficiently in his eyes, and again for the people. We talked about this in a question of the day too. He passed a lot of laws beneficial to the plebeians. To be able to give them jobs, to build public buildings, and then if it's public buildings, it's for the public. Now they've got public spaces to be able to go extend citizenship. Obviously, if you grant people citizenship, they're more likely to keep voting for you. He expanded the Senate, put a lot of his party loyalists in there to give him some backing there. And why is he doing all this? To stay popular, to stay popular, to stay popular, right? To be able to go and extend and bring this idea of being a Roman citizen farther and farther out from Rome, to be able to bring this capital R Roman idea to these different places. So the people love Caesar. They love these things. They're getting a lot from him. What is Caesar getting? Money, power, and wealth. But he is unable to see that the conspirators that have plagued him since the Civil War are still around there. And people begin to say that when he's elected a dictator for life, that this is crowning him as a king. And we Romans don't like kings, and we're going to take it upon ourselves to get rid of that. So while he gains the dictatorship, his fate is going to be sealed on the Ides of March 15th, 44 BC. He wakes up and his wife says, I got a bad feeling, Julius. I did a bad dream last night. Why don't you just stay home today? We can just have some wine, some cheese, and relax. Says, no, I just got some things at the Senate. Let me get it done. Pops into the Senate. Conspirators in the Senate ambush him, and on the floor of the Senate, they stab him 23 times all around there. And again, the story goes is that Caesar put up a fight, was pushing against there, was doing that until his either adopted son or very close friend or ally, Brutus, steps in front of him, pulls the knife from his toga, and again, the famous line, "Et tu, Brute, and you, Brutus," and he stabs him to death, and then Caesar curled up in a ball and accepted his fate. And again, very symbolically, very into legend, his bleeding body is left on the floor of the Senate at the foot of a statue of Pompey in the Senate built for him for his exploits. So Caesar is now removed, and we see some problems there. So to backtrack a little bit, again, Caesar is doing a whole lot of exploitings in Gaul and other stuff, and that allows him to stay popular as winning. We have Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar in the first triumvirate, and as Crassus is killed, Pompey and Caesar begin to work for power, and that leads to the very dramatic ending of the Roman Republic with Caesar crossing the Rubicon. And the symbolic nature of it, because again, it's not that big of a deal in some places, and this is, quote, where Caesar crossed, all right? But the idea that it's the symbolic nature of it, and by this action that then kicks off a civil war, because Caesar is technically committing treason against the Roman government by doing it, but he's committing treason in his eyes to do it for the Roman people. So very much the motivations on either side are clear. They're just not the same. This is a long civil war between Caesar and Pompey throughout the empire before Pompey is finally cornered and then killed in Ptolemaic Egypt. Caesar is now dictator for life, but as a couple of these paintings are going to show, he does not just understand the true powers that are working against him and conspiring against him behind them in the shadows. And famously, he's going to be stabbed on the floor of the Senate, and his still bleeding body is going to be left there. Right, as the conspirators go and say, yes, look what we did. Think of what would happen if a sitting president was assassinated, was killed, was stabbed to death on the floor of the U.S. Senate in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. The symbolic nature of that. These people know what they're doing. They know where they're doing it and why they're doing it, and it becomes a big deal there. So this kind of makes sense why we've got this pencil holder on my desk there with the idea of putting Caesar there. So there's our joke for today. Okay. Caesar's now dead. We now have another civil war break out between supporters of Caesar and the people who don't like them. This civil war after Caesar's death is very much going to wrap itself up pretty quickly with three of Caesar's supporters coming together. His adopted son Octavian, and for a variety of different reasons, Caesar does not have a son. Right? And again, you think about the heirs and other stuff and some of the issues there. So he adopts Octavian as his son and will become his heir. And there's some political hand-wringing and stuff in there behind the scenes, but we have his adopted son Octavian, his friend and general Mark Antony, Marcus Antonius, another great general and one of Caesar's kind of second in command, right-hand man type of guys, and then the politician Lepidus, one of Caesar's great supporters and allies in the Senate. These three are very quickly going to put an end to the opposition to Caesar, and together they're going to form in 43 BC the Second Triumvirate. And this political alliance works for about a decade before, like we saw with the First Triumvirate, this alliance will end in jealousy and violence amongst the three. Octavian is politically going to maneuver and get Lepidus to recognize it's safer for him to retire. He goes to his Italian villa, drinks wine, eats cheese, and relaxes. Octavian and Antony are the two to the left, and they get into a big fight over who gets to control the rich province of Egypt. And as they start to recognize that the empire is not big, the republic is not big enough for the both of them, they start drawing up who gets what. They both want Egypt because of all the wealth from there, and that's what gets them to a fight. So Octavian will get Antony and the Egyptians outmaneuvered, and this is where Cleopatra enters into the story. And at the Battle of Actium off the coast of Greece in 31 BC, Antony and the Egyptians are thoroughly defeated. Octavian is able to have Antony and Cleopatra under kind of his watchful eye. They both commit suicide, which leaves just Octavian left. Octavian will adopt the name Augustus, and he will then get rid of, for all intents and purposes, the Republic and replace it with a new government with him as Imperator, as Emperor of Rome. And we'll see in our next lecture how he's able to establish that government as the emperor. So to finish up, that's Lepidus on the left, Mark Antony on the right, and Octavian, later Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. He's able to claim that title with the defeat of Mark Antony and the Egyptians at Actium. They try to break out in their boats. Octavian's in a better position, and he defeats them. Art Antony is famously going to fall on a sword, commit suicide, and kill himself, and Cleopatra will also commit suicide, and the poetic tale, the legend that's passed down is that she's trying to be kept alive by Octavian for political and ransom purposes. She wants to not be this, so she's going to commit suicide. And then the story is that she had two Egyptian asps, very venomous snakes, stuck them into her chest. They butt down, and she committed suicide. So where we want to end today is just a little review and understanding, and you should be able to tell this story of how we go from a Roman Republic to a Roman Empire with Julius Caesar, this idea of a Roman revolution in politics, where in the Roman Republic era, we have the Senate having a lot of power, but within there, the people begin to go and clamor for more. So the first triumvirate of Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey is formed. Crassus gets gold poured down his throat. Pompey and Caesar get into an argument. They go and they fight. Caesar crosses the Rubicon River. We get into a civil war. The winner of that civil war is Julius Caesar, gets himself elected dictator for life. That becomes very much in many people's eyes a king. The Romans don't like kings. He's assassinated. We have a struggle. The second triumvirate then comes in, where we have Lepidus, Octavian, and Mark Antony. They rule for a decade. Octavian gets Lepidus to retire. That creates a civil war between Octavian and Mark Antony over Egypt. The winner of that is Octavian. Octavian will change his name to Augustus. And what we see here over time is that, and one of the, again, this might, why this becomes a story and why this is retold and repackaged several times, in trying to avoid becoming ruled by a king and fighting and bringing all this death and destruction to Rome to preserve the Republic. What this ends up happening is creating a Roman Empire with just one person in charge. And with the Senate fighting for power to kill down the power it has, with the Roman Empire, it's going to end up having less power than what it did. Now, the question we want to bring up and ask is this a bad thing? Will the Roman Empire, right, with less rights for the people and less representative government, be a bad thing for the people? In our next lecture, we'll see how the Roman Empire brings peace and prosperity for nearly 200 years to Rome.